The first time I watched a bull elk collapse from a broken leg in Lamar Valley, there were 100 tourists 10 yards away with cameras in their hands. The animal had stopped wrong in a shallow rut during a sparring run. One miscalculation. The leg snapped clean. The sound carried farther than people expected. For a few seconds, nobody moved. And then the phones came up. I was there on a routine patrol assignment, still new to Yellowstone. Still learning how quickly something ordinary can turn permanent out here. The elk tried to stand twice, failed both times. The herd moved on without him. By sunset, predators had already circled back. That was my first lesson in Yellowstone. The park doesn't pause because something went wrong. My name is Peter Wins, and I've worked search and rescue here for 14 years. Long enough to stop reacting to beauty. Long enough to see structure beneath the scenery. People think of Yellowstone as landmarks. Old Faithful erupting on schedule. The bright layered terraces at Mammoth Hot Springs. The surreal color of Grand Prismatic Spring. The roar of the lower falls crashing into the canyon. Those places are real. They're also controlled. Managed. Bordered by railings and boardwalks and signs written in clear language. The rest of the park stretches far beyond that vision. North of Canyon Village, the timber closes in thick enough that noon light turns flat and gray. Near Norris Geyser Basin, the ground steams in quiet vents that don't announce how deep the heat runs. The ridgelines around Mount Washburn take wind from 3 directions at once and send it back down the slopes in unpredictable bursts. Yellowstone covers over 2 million acres. That scale matters. Terrain changes quickly. Elevation shifts your breathing. Weather arrives earlier than forecast. Distance looks manageable until you account for grade. Search and rescue exists inside those margins. I didn't take this job because I wanted stories. I grew up in Montana. My father worked seasonal trail crews during the summers. I learned to read cloud buildup before I learned to drive. After serving in the Army, I came back with a preference for clear systems. Yellowstone is one, even if it doesn't advertise itself that way. There are rules here. Cold water steals body heat fast, especially in the Yellowstone River near Fishing Bridge during runoff. Thermal crust near the edges of some basins will collapse without warning if you step off marked ground. A 10-mile hike in Hayden Valley under sun and wind demands more water than most visitors carry. If you respect those rules, you can predict most outcomes. When dispatch calls in a missing hiker, Marty Singh gives us the details in the same measured tone every time. Last known coordinates, clothing description, experience level, time overdue. We confirm, we map, we assign sectors. Rena Caldwell checks gear before we move. She counts carabiners without being asked. She studies the terrain overlay longer than most. If aviation's required, Wes Harlan clears airspace and checks wind drift over ridges. He knows which canyon walls create turbulence before you ever see the rotor spin. Most missions follow a pattern. Separation at a junction, underestimated distance on a switchback, dehydration, a twisted ankle near inspiration point. A solo backpacker overdue near the waterfalls. We move, we locate, we extract. That's the rhythm. Yellowstone, for all its size, behaves predictably most of the time. You learn how long it takes to move a mile in lodgepole pine versus open meadow. You learn how your radio signals carry along the canyon rim versus down in the timber. You learn where GPS loses strength near thermal interference and where it locks in clean. Experience sharpens your internal measurements. After enough years, you know when your body has climbed 800 feet versus 600. You know when 40 pounds of gear should have slowed you more than it did. You know when a ridge should appear in your line of sight based on map and pace. That calibration keeps you alive. It also means you notice when something shifts. There are areas in this park where the spacing between landmarks feels tighter than it measures on paper. Corridors of timber where sound carries in ways that don't match the density of the trees. Stretches of trail near certain basin edges where wind behaves inconsistently with the open sky above. None of that appears on brochures. Visitors move from Mammoth to Old Faithful to the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone and believe they've seen it all. They haven't stepped into the longer miles beyond the maintained loops. They haven't felt how quiet it becomes near the backcountry stretches north of Tower Fall after the day traffic fades. Yellowstone doesn't announce how big it is. It lets you misjudge it. And it doesn't announce its strangeness either. The first few years I worked here, I focused entirely on procedure. Map, pace, weather, equipment. If something felt off, I checked batteries, rechecked coordinates, adjusted for terrain. Most irregularities resolve that way. But after a decade, you build a deeper familiarity with the park. You recognize how the sun drops behind the range. You anticipate how long the canyon shadow takes to reach the river. You know how long it should take to cross a meadow with steady footing and moderate wind. When those expectations fail to line up, it stands out. Yellowstone is stable enough that deviation becomes obvious to anyone who's spent enough time inside it. There are specific ridgelines and timber corridors where I've seen that deviation more than once. Specific creek bends and basin edges where radio behavior changes in subtle but measurable ways. Specific stretches where distance compresses or expands against the clock you're wearing. The park doesn't look different in those places. Doesn't sound different, but the math shifts. And in search and rescue, when the math shifts, you pay attention. Because the only thing more dangerous than weather or wildlife in Yellowstone is assuming the terrain will behave exactly the way it did yesterday. It won't. And the first time that difference mattered, it began with a call that should have been routine. The call came in just after noon. Clear skies over Canyon Valley, light wind out of the west, 68 degrees and dry. The kind of day that fills every pullout and clogs every trailhead by 10 in the morning. Marty's voice came through, steady as always.
14-year-old male, separated from family near the junction between Ribbon Lake Trail and the main loop. Last visual was approximately 45 minutes ago. Phone pinged twice. Signal weak, but active.
Teenagers get turned around fast in timber. They move quicker than adults, and they're more likely to keep walking instead of stopping. Rena and I staged at the trailhead within 20 minutes. The parents were there, mother pale, father trying to answer questions clearly. The boy's name was Tyler. Blue windbreaker, gray hiking shoes, small day pack with 1 bottle of water. Did he cross the creek? I asked.
No,
the father said immediately.
He was right behind us. We stopped at the junction sign, and he wasn't there when we turned back.
The creek ran shallow this time of year, but cold. Crossing it would mean wet boots. Wet boots meant slowed movement. Slowed movement meant we'd find him quicker. We marked the last known point at the junction sign. Clean dirt, heavy foot traffic, nothing useful. Rena took the east sector. I took west for 50 yards, then cut back. Standard, expanding search. About 20 minutes in, Rena called out, "Peter!" I crossed to her position. Fresh boot prints in soft soil, smaller size, deep enough to be recent. The tread pattern matched what the father described, gray hiking shoes with a triangular lug pattern. The prints were on the far side of the creek. No scuffing on the near bank, no clear slide marks down the mud. Parents said he didn't cross, Rena said.
Parents don't always know, I replied.
We crossed. The water came just over the ankle, cold enough to sting through fabric. On the far bank, the prints were clear, even spacing, straight line, no erratic pivots like someone panicking. He'd moved calmly. We called it in. Marty logged our direction change.
Phone just attempted another ping,
Marty said.
Weak. Approximately 300 yards northeast of your current position.
That aligned with the direction of the tracks. We followed. The prints kept steady through timber. They avoided deadfall naturally, as if Tyler had adjusted his path deliberately instead of wandering. At one point, they curved slightly around a shallow dip, then returned to the original heading. Logical movement, no backtracking. After 10 minutes, Marty's voice cut back in.
Parents received a voicemail from Tyler's phone, time-stamped 1 minute ago.
What did it say? I asked.
Short message, I'm back at the sign,
he replied. Rena and I stopped walking. The junction sign was behind us. We'd left it nearly 40 minutes ago. Parents confirmed Tyler hadn't returned. Ping location? I asked.
Still northeast of you, moving slowly.
We kept following the tracks. Another 100 yards. The timber thinned slightly. Sunlight filtered through. We saw him before he saw us. Tyler was sitting against a fallen tree, knees pulled up, blue windbreaker zipped to his chin. He looked tired but alert. Tyler, I called. He turned fast. Relief hit his face immediately. We approached slowly, and no visible injuries, no signs of hypothermia, beyond mild shivering. Did you cross the creek? I asked while Rena checked his pulse and hands. He shook his head. No. Well, we found your prints across it. I didn't cross anything. Did you call your mom? I tried earlier, but it wouldn't connect. She got a voicemail just now. He frowned. I didn't leave one. Well, stress scrambles memory, I thought. That happens. We wrapped him in a thermal layer and started moving back. As we walked, I glanced at the ground. Our tracks were clear in the soil, fresh. Tyler's earlier prints ran straight back toward the creek. At the waterline, we paused. There were our inbound tracks. There were Tyler's outbound tracks. On both sides of the creek. I looked at Rena, and she looked at the bank carefully. There was no slide mark where he would have entered. No disturbed mud on the near side from a first crossing. Only the clean pattern of prints already established on the far bank when we arrived. We crossed again with him. Back of the junction sign, the parents ran to him. Tears, hugging, overlapping voices. Marty logged recovery time. And standard debrief followed. I asked Tyler once more about the creek. I saw your lights in the trees, he said casually. It's daylight, I said. Yeah, I know, but I saw him before you called out. I thought you were behind me. We hadn't deployed headlamps. None were active, I thought. People misperceive under stress. Light filtering through timber can reflect unpredictably. We wrote the report clearly. Subject located alive. No major injury. Movement inconsistent with subject recollection. Phone irregularities, likely signal delay. The official explanation was simple. Confusion, delayed voicemail, stress memory gaps, overlapping foot traffic misread. Every piece of it had a rational option. But the spacing of those prints, clear, forward-moving, already established across the creek before our boots entered the water, they stayed in my mind. Not because it frightened me, because things didn't line up. And in this job, that matters. The hill above Hayden Valley. The call came in at 9:47 p.m. Group of hikers overdue near the ridge line above Hayden Valley. 12 names on the backcountry permit. They were supposed to be down before dark. No checkout at the trailhead. Weather was stable. Clear sky, thin crescent moon, wind low but steady along the ridge. Night searches change the equation. Depth perception drops. Sound carries differently. You move slower because footing matters more than speed. Rena and I staged with 2 additional team members and began the ascent. The trail up that hill is gradual at first, then steep for the last quarter mile, gravel over hard dirt, loose rock near the crest. About halfway up, we heard it. A low buzzing sound. Not mechanical in the way a generator hums, not sharp like a drone. It had a layered quality, like multiple tones sitting on top of each other. It carried down the slope in steady waves. Rena stopped walking. "You hear that?" "Yeah," I said. We scanned the sky. Clear, stars visible, no aircraft strobes, no rotor sound. The buzzing didn't rise or fall with wind. It stayed constant. We continued climbing. As we neared the crest, we saw silhouettes against the sky. All 12 hikers were standing at the top of the hill. They weren't moving or talking. They were all looking straight up. Every one of them. We closed the distance quickly. "Park service," I called out. "You need to come down." No reaction. They were positioned close to the edge, near a steep drop that fell toward the valley. One misstep in the dark, and somebody could have gone over. The buzzing grew louder near the top. It vibrated faintly in my chest, not painful, but present. I stepped up beside the nearest hiker, a woman in her 30s. Her face was tilted skyward, eyes wide open, unblinking. "What are you looking at?" I asked. She didn't answer. I followed her line of sight. Directly above the ridge, maybe a few hundred feet up, something hovered. It wasn't shaped like any aircraft I recognized. There were no blinking navigation lights, no beam projecting downward. It looked like a dark, flattened oval against the stars. Edges indistinct, but clearly defined against the sky. It held position exactly, without any drift. The buzzing intensified slightly. Rena stepped beside me. "You seeing this?" "Yeah," I said again. None of the hikers reacted to our voices. They stood shoulder to shoulder, just staring up. A few had their hands slightly raised, palms forward. No reaching, just lifted. I keyed my radio. "Marty, we have visual on subjects. They're stationary at the ridge crest and we need assistance." The buzzing interfered with the transmission. Static bled into the channel.
Repeat.
Marty's voice cut in, then broke apart. I tried again. The object shifted slightly to the left. No acceleration or visible propulsion. It simply repositioned. The hikers took a half step forward as a group, toward the edge. And that snapped me out of watching. "We gotta pull them back," I said to Rena. And we moved fast. I grabbed the nearest man by his backpack straps and I yanked him backward. He resisted weakly, not actively fighting, just stiff. Rena hooked an arm around the woman beside her and dragged her down to a seated position. The buzzing spiked for a second, louder and sharper, then dropped back to its steady tone. "Down," I said to the others. "Sit down." One of our team members reached the crest and began physically guiding 2 hikers away from the edge. It took effort, They were responsive, but delayed, like they were waking from deep sleep. The object above us rose slightly, no tilt or visible thrust. It climbed straight up. As it gained altitude, the buzzing softened, and within seconds, it was higher than the surrounding ridgelines. Then it moved laterally at a speed that didn't match conventional aircraft. Smooth and fast, no sound change. It disappeared against the star field, and the buzzing stopped instantly. Complete silence followed. Wind resumed its normal tone through the grass. The hikers blinked almost in unison. The woman Irina had pulled down looked around, confused. "What happened?" she asked. "You were standing at the edge," I said. She looked over her shoulder at the drop and went pale. "We were watching it," one of the men said slowly. "It came over the valley." "Watching what, exactly?" I asked. He pointed upward. "The light." "There was no light," Rena said. He frowned. "It was right there." Another hiker spoke up. It was humming." "Do you remember walking up here?" I asked. They nodded. "Do you remember standing this close to the edge?" They all looked down at the drop. Several shook their heads. One woman started crying quietly. We moved them downhill immediately. No debate or delay. Radio communication normalized halfway down the slope. Marty's voice came through clear.
"Lost your transmission for 30 seconds. Repeat status."
"Subjects located," I said. "All ambulatory, descending now." At base, statements were taken. Descriptions varied slightly, but all 12 agreed on key points. A dark shape above the ridge. A humming sound. A feeling of being drawn upward. No one remembered us arriving until we physically grabbed them. We filed the report carefully. Unidentified aerial object observed. Audible buzzing interference. Subjects disoriented at ridge edge. No injuries. County officials followed up. Air traffic control confirmed no scheduled flights in that sector at the time. No drones registered. No military exercises. The hikers were interviewed separately. Stories aligned too closely to dismiss as suggestion. Word spread quickly. Local news picked it up. Strange lights in Yellowstone. Most people laughed it off. Weather balloon, drone prank, mass suggestion. But nobody could explain the radio interference. Nobody could explain why 12 people stood motionless at the edge of a dark drop, unresponsive to voices, until physically pulled away. Rena and I were asked if we believed it was extraterrestrial. We didn't answer that question. We described what we saw, we described the sound, we described the movement. After that night, I added the hill above Hayden Valley to the list of places I pay closer attention to. Not because of speculation, but because for 30 seconds on a clear night, 12 people stopped responding to their surroundings and stared at something that did not behave like any aircraft I've ever seen. And if we'd arrived just, a minute later, I think at least one of them would have stepped forward. The missing minutes on the switchbacks. The call came in mid-afternoon. Solo hiker overdue on the Mount Washburn Trail. Female, early 30s. Experience. Signed out at 9:10 a.m. Planned to summit and return by 1 p.m. Her car was still in the lot at 4:25. Weather was steady but thinning. High clouds moving in from the west. Wind picking up along exposed sections. Mount Washburn isn't technical, but it's exposed. The switchbacks climb gradually, then tighten near the summit. You can see long stretches of trail from below, which makes it easier to search visually. Rena and I staged at 4:50. We've timed that ascent in training. With gear, moderate pace, takes 50 to 60 minutes to reach the fire lookout tower at the top. Descent is quicker, about 40 if footing is good. We moved at standard search pace, not jogging, not pushing. First switchback marker, 8 minutes. Second, 16. Breathing matched the grade, legs steady, nothing unusual. We hit the third marker. I checked my watch. 21 minutes. That was fast. I looked up the slope. The next 2 switchbacks were visible. We should have been closer to 30 minutes at this point. Feels quick, I said. Rena glanced at her watch. Yeah. We didn't speed up. We continued climbing. The overlook section near the summit should have taken another 25 minutes from where we stood. We reached it in 12. I stopped. Rena stopped beside me. We both checked our watches again. 33 minutes total since leaving the trailhead. That wasn't possible at our pace with full packs. You running? She asked. No. You feel like you're running. No. We turned and looked back down the slope. The trail snaked below exactly as it always did. Same terrain and elevation markers. I keyed my radio. Hey Marty, confirm departure time from trailhead.
Logged 1652.
Marty replied. Confirm current time.
1717.
I looked at my watch. 1724. Say that again, I said.
1717.
Rena held up her watch. 1725. Yeah, Marty, our watches read 1725. Pause.
Yeah, that's not possible.
Marty said.
Your last check-in was at 1712.
We haven't checked in since departure, I said. Another pause.
I have you checking in at 1712 near marker 3.
Rena and I stared at each other. We didn't transmit at marker 3, she said. Marty replayed the log. Our voices came through clearly.
Unit 2 at marker 3, continuing ascent. The timestamp, 1712.
We were still physically climbing at that moment. I felt the slope beneath my boots, the wind against my jacket, and the disconnect between what my body had done and what the log recorded. Copy, I said slowly. We're at the overlook now.
Logged,
Marty replied. The missing hiker was visible from the overlook. She was sitting on a rock near a stunted pine about 50 yards off trail. Alive, thank God, and upright. We moved toward her. She looked up as we approached. You guys just passed me, she said. No, Rena said, we're just arriving. No, you walked by, the woman insisted. I waved, but you didn't stop. What time was that? I asked. 10 minutes ago, maybe 15. We checked her vitals. Slight dehydration, mild confusion, no injury. What happened? I asked. I kept passing the same bend in the trail, she said. I thought I was descending, but the fire tower kept appearing again. How long were you up here? Rena asked. She frowned. Oh, I don't know, an hour, maybe 2? Her phone showed her last summit photo, taken at 10:48 a.m. Her step counter indicated she had walked over 22,000 steps since then. That number suggested far more movement than the trail length would account for. We began descent together. Halfway down, I checked my watch again. 17:41. Time, I asked Rena. 17:42. I keyed Marty. Current time,
17:35.
he said. 7-minute difference. Confirm your system clock, I said.
Copy. Synced with NPS server at 1600.
He replied.
No drift detected.
We continued descending. The trail felt normal. Distance felt appropriate. We watched the trailhead. I looked at my watch. 18:03. Marty's log showed our arrival at 17:56. 7 minutes ago. Back at base, we cross-checked devices. Rena's watch and mine matched exactly. Both were 7 minutes ahead of dispatch. We checked them against an external reference clock. They were correct. Marty's system showed no error. The recorded audio of our 1712 check-in was clean. Our voices clear. Time-stamped. We had no memory of transmitting. The hiker's statement matched her timeline internally. She believed she'd been moving continuously for hours, yet her physical fatigue did not align with that level of exertion. We filed the report carefully. Subject located alive. Disorientation likely due to fatigue and mild dehydration. Device timing discrepancy noted. Radio log irregularity under review. Equipment test showed no malfunction. GPS tracks showed our ascent as a clean line following the switchbacks. Distance logged, normal. Elapsed time according to dispatch, normal. Elapsed time according to our watches and our physical perception, shortened on ascent, ascended on descent. 7 minutes missing in one direction, 7 minutes gained in the other. Rena and I went back to the Overlook 2 weeks later during a routine patrol. Clear sky, no search in progress. And we timed the ascent again. 56 minutes. Exactly where it should be. We checked in at marker 3. Marty logged it at the same time our watches showed. No discrepancy. The trail looked the same. The wind felt the same. Nothing about Mount Washburn suggested irregularity. But that afternoon, on a measured climb we both know well, we reached the summit 20 minutes faster than we should have without increasing pace. And our voices checked in from a position that we had not reached yet. The missing minutes never appeared. They remain in the log, time-stamped, recorded, and unaccounted for. The white line on the ridge. The call came in just after 11 a.m. 2 adult hikers, late 20s, overdue on a ridge run east of the Yellowstone River. They'd planned a loop that crossed an exposed spine above timberline and dropped back down near a marked drainage. Clear forecast. No storms predicted. Light wind. Visibility unlimited. They hadn't checked out by their planned return time, and a friend waiting at the trailhead had grown uneasy. Rena and I staged within 40 minutes. Midday light was sharp. The sky was clean blue. You could see miles in every direction from the lower approach. The ridge above us cut a narrow line against the horizon. Nothing about the weather suggested trouble. We began the ascent at a steady pace. Open meadow at first, then scrub pine, then rock and thin soil as the slope steepened. About an hour in, we reached the shoulder below the ridge crest. And that's when we saw it. Across the top of the ridge, stretching left to right as far as we could see, was a wall of white. Not fog drifting in, not cloud lowering. A defined line. On our side of the line, the air was clear, blue sky overhead,
Sunlight sharp on the rocks. Beyond the line, everything was white. No detail, no depth. It looked like someone had drawn a boundary across the ridge and filled the far side with milk. Rena stopped beside me. Wind on our side moved normally, steady and predictable. The white mass beyond the ridge didn't move. It didn't roll or swirl. It just held. We approached cautiously. The boundary wasn't gradual, it was abrupt. At roughly 10 yards from the line, the air felt much cooler. I extended a trekking pole into it. The tip disappeared instantly into white. Pulled it back and clear again. We keyed the radio. Marty, confirm weather in our sector?
Clear skies,
He began.
no precipitation within 50 miles.
Yeah, so you seeing any cloud formations over the ridge east of our position?
Negative.
We stepped forward together, and crossing that line felt like stepping into dense smoke. Visibility dropped to less than 5 feet. Sound dampened immediately. The wind that had been steady on our backs vanished. It wasn't replaced with calm. It just stopped. I could hear my own breathing louder than anything else. "Rena?" I said. "I'm here." And then snow began falling. Not from above, I don't think. It was like it appeared in the air around us. Fine flakes forming and dropping in ground level, settling instantly onto rock and scrub. I looked up. Above the white ceiling, the sky was still blue. Snow was forming beneath clear sky. Within seconds, a thin layer coated the ground at our boots. "Mark the boundary," Rena said. And I tied a strip of orange tape to a scrub branch just inside the clear air, and another a few feet into the white. We stepped back into the clear side. Sunlight, wind, no snow. The tape inside the white blurred from view. We circled left along the ridge, staying on the clear side. The white mass extended as far as we could see. It wasn't drifting downhill or rising upward. It just held its line. "We can't wait," I began. "They could be in there." And we re-entered. This time we moved deliberately. Compass out, short steps, physical contact maintained. Footprints behind us vanished quickly. Snow accumulated faster than it should have. "Mark every 10 yards, Rena said. We tied tape to low branches as we moved. The snow underfoot felt different. It wasn't powder. It compacted too easily and filled back in too fast. After roughly 200 yards, measured by pacing, we saw silhouettes ahead. 2 figures standing near a small cluster of rocks. They weren't moving. We closed distance. Both hikers were upright, facing the same way. "Park Service," I called. They turned slowly, faces pale but alert. "You found it too," one of them began. "We followed the tracks." "What tracks?" I asked. There was a set of footprints ahead of us. We thought someone else was on the ridge," they said. I scanned the ground. Snow covered everything. "No other teams are out here," I said. "There were prints," the first hiker said. "We kept following them. They were just ahead, and every time we caught up, they went farther." "How long have you been in this?" Rena asked. They looked at each other. "An hour?" one guessed. I checked my watch. We'd crossed the boundary less than 15 minutes earlier. "Any injuries?" I asked. They shook their heads.
Cold? A little? We began immediate extraction, and as we moved back toward our marked path, the buzzing absence of wind remained constant. The snow continued forming around us. Tape markers appeared and disappeared within seconds as accumulation thickened. When we reached the boundary, it was still exactly where we'd first seen it. We stepped through, and it was clear air, full sunlight. Wind resumed instantly. The snow on our jackets melted rapidly. Behind us, the white wall remained fixed in place. Within 30 seconds, the white mass began thinning. Not drifting, but dissolving. The line lost its sharp edge and faded like breath on glass. Within a minute, the ridge beyond was visible again. No snow, dry rock, blue sky overhead. We turned back. The area where the white hound had been showed no trace of moisture or frost. No residual snow, no fog bank rolling off. Just clear air. Well, we escorted the hikers down, and during debrief, they both described the same thing. A defined white wall appearing ahead of them on the ridge. A line of footprints leading into it. They followed, and the prints stayed just out of reach. They believed they'd walked for at least an hour inside it. Weather records later confirmed 0 precipitation in that sector. Satellite imagery showed clear sky. No cloud formation or cell storm or anomaly. Well, we returned to that ridge 2 weeks later during routine patrol. Bright sky, normal wind, clear visibility, no sign of the boundary. No evidence snow had ever formed there. The ridge still looks the same from below, sharp against the horizon, unremarkable. But I don't approach it casually anymore. Now there's one night I don't log in the system. Wasn't a rescue. No call came in. No coordinates were assigned. It happened on a routine patrol, and if I wrote it down the way it unfolded, it would sit in the archive with no category to file under. It was late October. The park had thinned out, most seasonal traffic gone. Nights came earlier and colder. The air carried that dry edge before first snow. I was running a solo perimeter sweep near a closed thermal corridor north of Canyon Village. People slip past barriers sometimes. Teenagers mostly. The patrol was standard. Radio check at 2100, battery full, headlamp at low beam. The forest in that sector grows tight. Lodgepole pine packs close, trunks pale and straight. The ground is uneven but predictable. Roots, fallen needles, shallow dips. At night, everything narrows to the circle your light cuts in front of you. At 21:18, I heard my name. Not shouted, not whispered. Spoken clearly from somewhere ahead and slightly right. I stopped moving. A woman's voice. Calm. I waited, listening for a second call. It came again, same tone and distance. I keyed my radio quietly and asked dispatch if anyone was in my sector. Negative. I stepped forward. If someone had slipped into a closed area after dark, they could be injured, disoriented, cold. My beam moved across the trunks, and then it found her. She stood between 2 pines, roughly 30 yards ahead, still, facing me, arms down at her sides. I called out standard procedure, identify herself, ask if she needed assistance. No reply. She raised one hand slowly, not high, just enough to be visible in the light, and waved. It wasn't frantic or desperate. It was deliberate. Slow side-to-side movement of her fingers and palm. I moved forward, careful with footing. 25 yards. The beam caught more detail. Long pale coat, not outdoor gear. The fabric hung straight without catching on brush. Her hair fell to her shoulders. She didn't shift her weight or look around, didn't react to the light in her eyes. She simply continued that slow wave. Now, people in distress behave unpredictably. They move, they call out, they ask questions, they show confusion. This woman did none of that. I closed distance again, 20 yards. Her face came fully into view. She was smiling. Her eyes were open wider than relaxed posture would suggest. They didn't blink under the beam. The air around us held steady at mid-30s. My breath showed with each exhale. Hers did not. Wind brushed the treetops above us. I heard it clearly. And her coat did not move. I took another step, 18 yards. Her hand kept waving. The smile deepened slightly as I approached. Every instinct I rely on in this job activated at once. This was wrong. The forest floor beneath her feet should have snapped twigs under weight. I heard nothing. Her shadow should have shifted with the angle of my headlamp. It remained strangely uniform. She took a step toward me. Her motion was smooth and measured, like someone sliding forward on rails. There was no sound, no adjustment for uneven ground. My pulse spiked. She spoke my name again, familiar in a way that reached somewhere deeper than recognition. And that was the moment my mind tried to reconcile what my eyes were seeing. The curve of her cheek, the line of her jaw, the way her head tilted slightly when she smiled. I knew that face, but I didn't say the name out loud. I stayed rooted for one more second, forcing myself to catalog details instead of reacting. Skin tone matched memory. Hair color. Small mark above the left eyebrow. She took another step forward, and the smile widened just enough to reveal teeth. I turned and I ran. Not controlled withdrawal or cautious repositioning, I ran full speed through timber. Branches struck my shoulders, roots caught my stride. My radio bounced against my chest, but I didn't slow down and I didn't look back. I reached the service road and pivoted hard, sweeping the tree line with my beam. Nothing. Just trunks and shadow. No pale coat or figure or movement. The forest stood exactly as it had before. Wind moved through it normally now. I keyed my radio and requested a vehicle pickup without elaboration. I kept my tone steady. I didn't report a threat. When I returned to base, Rena asked me what happened, and I didn't answer immediately. I went to my locker and sat down. I replayed the face in my mind carefully. I grew up in Montana. I knew that face from childhood photographs, from holidays, from hospital rooms. I'd watched it grow thin from chemotherapy. I'd stood beside it in a casket. Whatever it was in the tree line, it had looked exactly like my mother. But I knew it wasn't her. I knew whatever that thing was had been pretending. My mother had been dead for 16 years, and that wasn't her. If you work long enough in a place this large, you stop pretending it's only one thing. Yellowstone has waterfalls and families, and steam rising in clear morning light. It's elk moving through frost and bison crossing highways like they own them. It's laughter on boardwalks and the steady rhythm of boots on marked trails. But it's also something else. Sometimes you're halfway through a patrol, and the forest goes quiet in a way that feels deliberate. Not natural quiet or the normal hush when wind drops. A kind of pressure that settles in your ears before you notice it's there. Sometimes you catch movement in your peripheral vision that doesn't match the direction of the trees. A figure between trunks that's gone when you turn your head fully toward it. Sometimes the radio carries a half second of breath before a transmission that never comes. I've walked ridge lines at dusk and felt watched from angles that don't exist on the map. I've seen shapes standing at the edge of thermal steam that dissolve the moment you focus on them. I've found footprints in fresh dust that lead straight into open ground and then stop, with no turn and no backtrack. Most of it you explain. Wind, wildlife, fatigue. Your brain trying to complete patterns in low light. But not all of it. There are nights when the air feels occupied, when the dark between trees looks layered instead of flat, when a voice sounds close enough to touch and your training tells you not to respond. I don't romanticize it or label it. I log what I can measure. I bring people home when I'm able. But I've learned something after 14 years inside these boundaries. You see all kinds of people in Yellowstone. Some of them are alive. Some of them are dead. And some of them are pretending to be people. Whatever you do out there after dark, make sure you know which is which.